this special debate on whether New Yorkers should approve a state constitutional convention this fall. Voters will have to make that decision without yet knowing who would participate in the constitutional convention. If voters okay a convention this November, then 1 year later, in November of 2018, the same day of the midterm elections, New Yorkers would also be presented with candidates seeking to become convention delegates. Voters would pick 3 delegates from each state Senate district and others from a statewide slate. When most Americans think of constitutional conventions and convention delegates, one image comes to mind: the United States Constitutional Convention held in Philadelphia in 1787. That gathering featured some of the nation's best and brightest, including names like Washington, Franklin, Hamilton, and Madison. But thinkers of those caliber, one could argue, are in somewhat short supply in 2017. So the question is there any way to know who the delegates to a state constitutional convention might be, based both on history and how the delegate selection process would be implemented, Jerry?
It's fair to assume that the vast majority of the delegates running statewide will be the product of a political system. Because delegates run on a senatorial-sized district, that really enables political parties to run slates in those districts, which might include your state senator being running as a delegate and also running for re-election. So the fact of the matter is, between the petition gathering and the structure of its senatorial districts, plus there's our statewide at-large delegates who are appointed, it just stands to reason that the type of delegate that's going to get the opportunity to sit at the convention is going to come out of the political system.
Better we should have a dictatorship than a democracy in which people actually go out to vote for their representatives. The alternative, Jerry, is a system where someone appoints people, like in Russia. We have a democracy. We have an ability for the people to choose the candidates. If there is an answer to Andrew's question, however, what lessons of history are, the lesson of history is that only 13 out of 220 delegates were sitting members of the legislature. Jerry gooses that number up by talking about
it's factual. That's
right, but judges, you're going to criticize the judges as a political hacks?
Judges come from the political system. They're not hacks, but they understand at their level, where they were before, what the political process is like.
And that's a bad thing.
That depends on who the candidate is.
There you go. And this is an opportunity for people who, given the history where it's not dominated by legislators, people can decide to offer themselves as candidates, and I think we would be unsurprised by the quality of the delegates.
But if the selection process is done by state Senate district and with parties putting forward slates of candidates, it's easy to figure that it's very likely the composition would be similar to the composition of the state Senate.
You do not have to go through a political party to get on the ballot.
Right.
It is not like a general election
But it's much easier to get on the ballot if you have a political party behind you.
It is indeed. It is easier to get on the ballot. But if there's a citizen movement, a Tea Party, or a Working Families Party that wants to put people up that don't come from the establishment, then it's not difficult to do in Senate districts. And because this is a convention, not a legislative term, I think you'll see a great variety of people and a great variety of successful candidates.
I think Richard is dreaming the impossible dream. It is very much of a political system, even becoming a delegate, if you will, and the structure of the conventions really favors the involvement of the political parties.
There is also the question about what the public's role would be in approving or rejecting whatever a constitutional convention decides to do. If approved, elected delegates would begin the convention in April of 2019. Delegates would propose, debate, and vote on amendments, but they would not go into effect at that point. In fact, delegates have in the past gone through an entire convention and not approved any amendments. But if they do, those proposed amendments still have to be approved by a majority of New York voters in the 2019 general election. That's November 2019. Delegates can bundle amendments together, so one single ballot question in 2019 could cover a number of actual amendments. And just like other elections and other ballot questions, we would expect to see ads and other public pushes both for and against amendments on the ballots. Richard, would voters then be in a position to make a truly informed decision on these amendments, or were they likely to be swayed by the political processes, the advertisements?
By democracy. And I listen to both you guys, and there is this implicit notion that the American democratic system cannot function in the interest of the people of the United States.
You're just dreaming.
Well, I may be dreaming, but I'm dreaming in an optimistic and thoughtful way about what is possible. I don't think it's a stretch, Jerry, to go out and say that the delegates will be selected, they'll be diverse as they've always been, and they will take it seriously. But more importantly, when it comes time for people to decide, if they don't feel they have enough information, they'll vote no, which is what happened in '67. There are victories and there are victories. We should have confidence in our democracy and confidence in the people of the state.
You know, what I find interesting as I go about this state, traveling and speaking about this, is that the people in the higher education community are afraid of a constitutional convention. The people in the education community feel they're well protected by the Constitution. The people in the labor community feel that the Labor Bill of Rights in the Constitution is enough of a protection. The answer is the people who are pushing for this constitutional convention are saying, let's try voting yes and see what happens. I say that's not the way to go.
Given the fact that voters would have the final say on any product that comes out of a constitutional convention, why not give it a shot? I mean, it's almost like saying you're afraid of striking out, so you don't want to take a turn at bat.
Well, you know, it's fascinating when you talk about that. A few years ago, there were 6 propositions on the ballot, and one would say, well, the voters were confused, you know, there's so many things. They approved 5 and turned down 1. One of them was to allow judges to serve beyond the age of 70. So it's interesting, they approved changes in the civil service law, they approved a variety of changes, and they turned down a particular one.
You're making my
So
point, Jerry.
the voters, no, I'm saying the voters are intelligent enough during the course of a regular year, and there'll be 3 propositions on the ballot this year, to make informed decisions.
Why would they not be similarly informed to make those decisions as the result of, whatever comes out of a constitutional convention?
Let's say what came out of a convention are 12 propositions, okay? Those propositions will be affected by who has the most outside money to push for the adoption of it. And it may well be that there are 9 great good government propositions out there, but it may be that outside money will decide that none of them are
Jerry's
good.
argument is they did it successfully in the past, but they can't do it successfully in the future. Look, if he had confined himself to concerns about the good things in the Constitution, as I said before, that's not chopped liver, Jerry. Those concerns need to be weighed, but they need to be weighed against the need for change and reform of the way we govern and the way we live our lives. We cannot proceed down the road we're on as though it's going well. We need
But Richard, you're making an assumption. You're making an assumption that there's no other way to make change in Albany. This past year, they were able to raise the age, if you will, of juveniles being sent to prisons through public pressure. You're saying the only way to solve it is a constitutional convention.
Gentlemen, we're going to take our final break. When we come back, our panelists question one another about a possible constitutional convention.